Hello, welcome to Big Bang Radio Spotlights. This is the show where we talk to independent artists from all around the world all about their music and their process for making it. I'm your host, Isaac Anderson, and today I get to sit down with Jeremy from the band Everything Everything. Without any further ado, here's the interview. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Been very excited to talk to you because pretty much everybody watching has most certainly probably heard your music somewhere around, but we're going to dive into your music a little bit more into the interview, obviously. But before we go any further, I wanted to ask you, what is your earliest musical memory?
That's a good question. My earliest musical memory that I can actually recall, I guess, would be sitting in the car with my parents, as it is for so many people. And I think I remember hearing the Beatles live at Hollywood Bowl. I didn't know what it was, but it was the first experience of hearing music that really physically excited me. And I can't remember where we were going or what we were doing, but I remember the music we listened to on it and on that journey. So yeah, I would have been 4 or 5 at that time, I guess.
Heard that, man. It's weird how that kind of stuff stays with you too. Like how, like you can't remember like big things in your life sometimes, but like little things like that, like little intricate details,
Absolutely
is really cool.
And music is very profound for that. I think it connects with part of your brain that nothing else does. So it can and it gets in deeper.
How exactly did you get started playing music? Because you're a killer musician, obviously. I don't know, was there somebody in your family that really encouraged you to?
My parents were very musical, yeah, and they very much encouraged me and my brother to sing and to play instruments. And I was playing the violin for about 15 minutes, and then I was playing cello at school. And around the time that I had started attending secondary school, there were a lot of the kind of mainstream bands were playing guitars. You know, this was like Britpop era, Blur and Oasis. And, you know, if you switch the TV on, that's what you saw with like groups of guys with guitars. And that seemed so exciting, not just musically, but like the actual camaraderie, the gang element of that. So I put together a band with my friends at school. I wanted to play guitar initially, and I don't think I was up to it technically. So I ended up defaulting to being a humble bass player. And I've just been doing that for about 25 years, I suppose.
It's not easy to make a really good bass part. People just assume it's just good.
That's sort of what I enjoy about it, really. I think it's hard to be an interesting bass player, and it forces you to be imaginative with the most fundamental of building blocks, which is rhythm and melody and harmony. You know, you've got to make it work with only those 3 things.
Absolutely, man. Well, you mentioned like a high school band. Was that Modern Bison that you're talking about?
No, Modern Bison came a little bit later.
Okay.
And Jonathan, who was the singer in Everything, he and I kind of put that band together as a way to get the sort of Fugazi out of our system. You see what I mean? Like, we loved a lot of like post-hardcore and math rock and post-rock. And we wanted to kind of co-opt certain aspects of that and put it into a poppier band, which is what we did at the beginning of Everything. But we also wanted to do a really straight-faced version of that music as well. For exactly 9 months, we gave it a time limit. And that was what Modern Bison was. And in fact, he and I were already playing in a band called Pilgrim Please before that was kind of the prototype for Everything. The first few Everything songs we carried over from that band, in fact. So yeah, there have been a few different incarnations for all of us. Also, Mike and Jonathan, when they were at school together, before I met John at university, they were in various different kind of pop punk bands called Chaffinch was one of the bands they were in, and Brian Makes Love, that was another good name they had.
Was that from Beach Boys, Brian Wilson and Mike Love?
We always like to bring that one up.
Very nice. Well, I think you touched on it a little bit, but like it looks like this was kind of like a really organic progression from you guys were friends, and this just kind of like morphed into something super big. But like in kind of your own mind, like what was kind of the official start of Everything?
I think we'd all been in different bands and kind of discovered what did and didn't work for us artistically and even commercially and professionally, I guess. And this was as we were coming to the end of college, and Jonathan said, I want to put together like the definitive lineup with the best people I've played with in my life to this point, which he decided was me on bass and Michael and our first guitar player, Alex Niven. And that was at the end of 2007. And we all moved into one house together in South Manchester. We'd just graduated, so we kind of had nothing better to do. And we moved into a house together that had a basement we could rehearse in. We spent 4 or 5 nights a week down there, honing the songs and learning to play together, really. And we had this very sort of short, sharp post-punk aesthetic at that time. It was 2 guitars, 3 vocals across the front, drums, bass. That was it. There was no electronic element. We were really enamored of the sort of 3-part harmony vocal sound that we heard in loads of like American R&B stuff like Destiny's Child, and the sort of punky British punk end of that, like Future Heads. We thought they were great vocal groups. Even the Beatles, you know, nobody talks about the Beatles as a vocal group, but they are one, and we were really inspired by that. And it gave us something that set us apart really quickly. And that very basic setup meant we could get into one small car and drive anywhere in the country and play gigs with borrowed backline and borrowed drums. And that was quite an old-fashioned method, really. That was how we learned to play together and how we learned the lifestyle, I think, as well, what it actually took to be a gigging band. And we did a good couple of years of that before we kind of started to become a more kind of polished and professional unit, I suppose, and, you know, got a record deal, got management, all that stuff happened later. But I was really glad that we'd started in quite an old-fashioned way, actually, just doing lots of touring, lots of gigging, spending a lot of time in a really horrible van.
I want to talk about the name real quick. So I know where the name comes from, but for those that I'm sure you probably touched on this in many interviews, but the name Everything Everything. Can you tell people where that where that came from and kind of who came up with it?
We had a kind of a short list, and the other names on the list were just too hilarious for us. Like Infinity Face was one. Leg was another name.
I kind of like the simplicity of Leg. That's nice.
Yeah, Leg was sorely tempting. I remember at the time saying it's quite good. I think there probably is a band called Leg now. But Everything, we liked the rhythm of it. We liked the look of it written down, which we thought was important. You know, graphically, I think that's important. We liked the sort of sense of possibility of it. You know, it's. I think also what was important about it at the time for us was that it suggested that there was nothing off limits, that we would take inspiration from everywhere. Like, we didn't see a reason why we would have to enjoy Slint but not Girls Aloud. You know, we thought it was all kind of a post-structuralist smorgasbord, and we were allowed to take what we enjoyed from any area of music. Nothing was more or less credible than anything else. And that's what went into the band at the very beginning. So we thought that kind of summed it up as well. And then only months and months later did we realize that, of course, it's the opening line on Kid A, which was a huge record for us by a band that had been a guiding light, Radiohead, in our cultural experience growing up. You know, that band is our Beatles, really. Awesome. In the 90s and the 2000s. So, yeah, I think, honestly and truly, none of us realized it at the time. And then only later did we think, oh, yeah, we've inadvertently named ourselves after a Radiohead song.
When you write music, do you tend to all write individually and bring stuff to the table, or do you guys get together at like rehearsal and like, okay, let's work something out?
Sort of yes to all the above, okay. Really. I think in my case and in Michael's case, we tend to come to things at a secondary stage. And increasingly what's happening is there'll be a back and forth between John and Alex on the sort of kernel of the idea for a while. And then the secondary process is that we get together as a live band and we knock stuff around by playing, but we also are hunched around a laptop, making the arrangements within an Ableton session that is the demo. And yeah, increasingly, I mean, at the beginning of the band, we were basically reverse engineering MIDI demos that Jonathan had made in different programs like Reason and latterly Ableton. And then we wrote much more as a live band on Arc, which is our second record, because we'd done so much touring, we were just used to that way of working. And we were quite enamored of that version of ourselves. We wrote and demoed live in a really big sounding, big room. The third album was a lot of playing together, but the more successful aspects we realized at that time were when somebody came with quite a well-formed idea that required relatively little interference from everybody else. And then on Fever Dream and on this record as well, this sort of newer process of Alex writing a lot of instrumental music and Jonathan top-lining it, and then we attack it as a live band. That emerged at that point. It's something that's always slightly moved around, but increasingly I think we've got better at streamlining the whole thing. Like John and Alex will spend quite a lot of time together, just the two of them these days, which certainly on the last album was the more methodical process. And then over the course of the last this time last year, when I finished touring with Foals, because I spent a lot of time on the road last year with another band called Foals, we kind of got together and we had certain songs we were really confident in. And we also had, this has been the case since the beginning of our band. We'll have songs that we like one section of, and another song that we like one section of, and we'll try to marry up the two ideas, match the keys, match the vibe, match the tempo. Quite often 3 songs will become one, or 3 initial demo ideas will become one. And so for a song like Violent Sun, for example, that chorus had existed for months beforehand, and John had this verse, and we were talking about Bruce Springsteen and the Arcade Fire and the kind of the sort of propulsive, urgent music we wanted to emulate in that song. And I recognized that we had these 2 sections that were both trying to achieve the same thing. They just weren't in the same song. So we had an afternoon together where we just jammed them together. That's Song of Two Halves, and Song of 2 or 3 different origins is very common for us.
And that's so cool how you'll have like an idea kind of sitting around and like it's not really like fully formed and like you need another one. It's like, oh, this needs like a chorus, or like this needs like a cool weird bridge section that's completely different. I like the Beatles did that. I think that's what Day in the Life is. Like, you know, it's like this super dark verse and it's Paul's woke up, got out of bed, and like it's really happy. Exactly, it's like after John talks about somebody, you know, like dying a horrible death. But yeah, that's super awesome. I'm always interested to hear about the songwriting process. But kind of hopping back a little bit. So when you guys first started, it sounds like you were kind of on that typical grind, but you gained quite a bit of popularity, and you got signed to a label, like you said earlier, and you got managers. You went through the whole shebang. Like when that happened, how did you guys feel? Like, was it like overwhelming? Like, oh my goodness, like we're getting signed by labels. Everybody's listening to us. We're on the news all the time. You know, like how did that feel? Like, what was going through your mind?
It was great because it was a real moment of celebration, literally, for us. Also because we felt that we'd spent 2 and a bit years working towards that moment, and that it gave us legitimacy and freedom and took a lot of the pressure off, because obviously none of us had any money for a long time, and then suddenly we were actually able to kind of pay ourselves and pay our debts and get on, and then get on with making the record we wanted to make. It was particularly exciting because we knew we'd been signed on terms that we had been able to set with the 2 years work that we'd already put in. We knew that we'd earned it earned a position of trust really from the label, and that we were going to be able and allowed to make the record we wanted to, which is totally what happened. And we've never felt interfered with by any of the labels we've worked with. We've always felt self-sufficient. And obviously we've worked with great producers, and that's been part of it as well, but they've always been of our own choosing. We've mostly made our own videos. We really did feel, and still do feel, that we had pretty much total creative control. We want to collaborate with people. We want to listen to their advice, and people have expertise that we don't. But we have say over everything, final say over everything, and that's always been the case. It wouldn't really occur to us to do it any other way. We've also, the popularity and the success that we have gained, I feel, is really valued because we've done it entirely with the music we wanted to make. We've never really made compromises in the music to bring more people in. We're quite hard on ourselves. We're quite self-critical. We don't really need anybody in to rein in our well, maybe we do, but we don't really need anybody to rein in our worst excesses, because we're ultra paranoid, really. We try not to have much indulgence, I think. I think a lot of people would disagree with me if I say that our music is. But yeah, I think it's, when it comes to, say, writing and recognizing what the singles are, we're quite good at that, I think. We're quite realistic about it, and we see it as a challenge rather than as a compromise.
Kind of hopping onto your location right now. So I believe you're in Manchester, right?
Yeah, the band is still based here, but we're all kind of scattered around the country now. Me and Jonathan are still in Manchester. Mike's in London. Alex is down the road in Shrewsbury. Heard
that. Well, how was the local music scene kind of for you guys when you guys were playing shows, and even now, kind of like I don't know how the music scene is over there in that part. Like, is it your kind of music really popular over there, or like has the music scene shifted over the last couple of years? I don't know.
The great thing about Manchester music historically, we're going back 40, 50 years more, right back to the Hollies, Bee Gees. There are loads of bands from the 60s and 70s in Manchester that people don't really talk about, 10cc and the Bee Gees, and because they're international concerns, you forget that they have Mancunian origins. The great thing about all of it, and then you come through the really famous period, Joy Division, Smiths, New Order, Happy Mondays, Stone Roses. There's so much music, and then into the 90s and beyond. The thing that we found so inspiring about all of that is the spirit of radicalism, the idea that you can respect and co-opt a lot of what that music has to offer, but you make it something new. You do something new with it. That's the most important thing about all that music, and that's the most important thing for us. When we started, there was definitely a kind of growing consensus around that idea, actually, and around changing national and international perceptions of what this city was about musically, because it had got stuck in a rut. I mean, the music scene here locally has always moved forward. There's always been stuff going on, but whether or not the media recognized it more widely was a question mark. So we wanted to kind of change the story a bit about what Manchester music was about, and it didn't have to be stuck in with the Heritage Acts. It could be about newer ideas. And there were a lot of bands around that time that kind of had similar ideals. Dutch Uncles, Delphic, Egyptian hip hop. And we played with a lot of those guys early on. And crucially, because of the long-standing live music lifestyle and culture, the infrastructure is here. It was really easy for us to get gigs really early on, and that was a real good discipline for us, because we could walk into Night and Day and give them a demo CD and say, could we play, please? And they'd call you the next day and say, yeah, you're booked for Thursday night. And then that focused us, and like, okay, well, we've got to get at least 6 songs together. And we did that. We've played every one of those tiny rooms in town. And then, there's a proper ladder you can climb. The network of other musicians, promoters, clubs and venues, national promoters. It's a really sustaining scene here, and also we were out of the kind of quicksilver, quick burning glare of the London scene. It meant that we could develop on our own terms 200 miles away from the heart of the less forgiving scene in London, so that when we did play London, we were actually ready. Or if people did want to come and see us from London, they had to make the effort to do so. So we were able to kind of do things on our own terms and build our own scene, really.
This is maybe not music related. Well, it's definitely not music related. But I'm always curious to hear what people say. If you weren't playing music, what would you be doing? I don't know if you've ever had something else in your mind. It's like, I always like this,
It's hard to imagine. And I might have to soon. But I've always enjoyed talking and writing about music just as much as I have enjoyed playing it. So I think I would still be involved in music in some way, and maybe there's a future for me in somewhere like that as well. I love radio. I love reading about music. I've done bits of writing about music. That's kind of in my blood as well, because my parents are both music critics. So I think that's my short answer. I would like to be looking at music from a different angle.
Heard that. Yeah, I always feel like artists always kind of veer more towards like something also related to art. Like I'd be working in film, or I'd be talking about music. I'd be doing something. So it's really awesome. I know you've been in this world for so long that you probably couldn't even imagine doing anything else, and neither should you, because I mean you got it down pat. But let's talk about the new album right now. So I believe the new album's Re-Animator, and it hit streaming. Really cool. And before we kind of hop into like more like writing the stuff. The album cover is like all you guys painted gold and everything. Did you actually paint yourself gold to do that, or is that just completely like a Photoshop effect?
That cover came about by default, really, in the same way that the In Birdsong video came about, because we suddenly found ourselves under lockdown. We finished all the music, thank God, but we were under lockdown and we weren't able to make videos or shoot photos in the usual way. We hadn't finished the artwork either. And this process emerged whereby Jonathan decided he was going to learn this 3D modeling software called Blender. I was like, I've got loads of time at home now, so I've always wanted to try to work with this stuff and see what's possible with it. And kind of for fun, really, we sent him a lot of pictures of ourselves, and he was inputting the data into the software, and it was kind of regurgitating these 3D modeled versions of each of us. And we realized that the more pictures we took, like hundreds of ourselves from different angles in just one pose, the more information we could give this software, the more detailed its impressions of us were. So we did that. We got like our partners and wives and family and stuff to do the same thing themselves, and that all ended up in the video. And we took hundreds of pictures of ourselves standing in one pose, sent them to John, and then he was able to create these figures. And then we worked with a designer who was able to kind of configure and orientate it all for the cover. But yeah, we hadn't planned to put ourselves on the cover at all, actually. It was only after we started to get really excited by the software and the possibilities of it that we did. I really like it because it really reminds me of, I think it's what Kraftwerk would do if they put an album out now. They would be looking at what the newest technological representation of actually quite an old traditional idea, which is having the four members of the band on the cover. They would look at what was possible with that idea. I think that's what we've done there. So yeah, I love it. I love that cover.
The album sounds great too. We talked a little bit before this interview about some technical stuff because that's the kind of stuff that tickles my fancy. But for most people that kind of don't know the background of this record, like what was the recording process like? Like, do you guys go to the studio and do it? Do you do a lot of it yourselves? I don't know.
We had made sure that the songs and the arrangements we were really solid on, and we were confident in them. Because we knew that our producer, John Congleton, Texan boy, was only going to give us 2 weeks to record with, which was great, actually. It was really exacting for us. It was really focusing, and we didn't feel rushed at any point. I think also we have become better studio musicians, and we knew the songs, we knew the parts. It didn't feel rushed, but it did mean that we were a little bit more clipped in our approach, and we weren't able to finish ideas. They had to be finished already, which I think is a good thing. We spent 2 weeks at a studio called Rack in London, which is where we'd done a lot of our second album, Arc. But we were actually in a different studio this time, different room, which is the room that Radiohead did the bends in. So we were excited about that. And John was just great to work with, because we were saying to him in advance, we were saying, how are we going to do this in a fortnight? He was like, all records should only take 2 weeks, which is very much an Steve Albini kind of ideal. I think he trained with Albini, so I think he's co-opted a lot of his no-nonsense ideas. And we were like, how do you manage it normally? How do you manage to get a record done in 2 weeks flat? He was like, well, you just don't mess around. As he put it, no grab, which we really liked. We nearly called the album that.
I like the accent there too. You even threw in a little American accent.
Yeah, I didn't do that well.
No, you did. You did.
But actually, as it happened, we deliberately wanted to make this record warmer and more universal themes and reflect the different changes in our lives, and this new era in our lives as a band and in our lives personally, and step away from the political side that we talked about so much on the last two records. But actually, we spent so much time talking to John about American politics and about the Democratic selection. And we also voted in a general election in the UK. So in a way, we were kind of surrounded by politics and trying not to write about it, trying not to talk about it on the record. And in fact, I think we did as much messing around as we have done on any other album. I don't feel like it was just work. We had a really good time with John.
Heard that. And it sounds like you had a good time just overall in the studio.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, it was quite relaxed, and that's not always the case for us. I think we were all quite determined to enjoy ourselves and to be less uptight about it, because I think that's reflected in the music. It has a lightness of touch about it. It's light on its feet. It's not overworked. It's not encumbered. And sometimes our music, our desire for our perfectionism, I suppose, has kind of wrung the immediacy and the emotion out of it occasionally, I think. So we were really, we just left a lot of rough edges, basically. There were a lot of mistakes on the record. I think that gives it all the more humanity.
Heard that, man. And it's a great sounding album. It's a great written album. Everything about it's really, really cool. We play it at the station all the time. So if people want to kind of keep a track social media wise, where can people find you?
On Instagram and on Twitter, we are E_E_ on both of those platforms. And then on Facebook, we're just everything.
Heard that. And I know you guys just did this album, and you're pushing that now, and obviously shows can't really happen because of COVID stuff going around. But what's next for you guys? Do you guys have anything like kind of floating around your mind that you want to do? Maybe like some live stream shows?
We're kind of try and be flexible with regards to shows. I mean, we should be touring the UK in the spring, if that's possible. And if it's not, then we'll push those dates back to a point where we hope it will be possible. And the same goes for Europe and America. We'll get to you when we can, and we'd love to. It'll be our pleasure. But we are just going to use this time as best we can to write and record more music, really. I think that's the best thing anybody can be doing with this time at the moment.
Lovely, man. Well, look, Jeremy, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been an honor to talk to you. I'm a big fan. Before we go, I have one more question. I don't know if you've ever watched a Big Bang Radio Spotlight before, but I'm a musician, but I also love film, and I'm obsessed with both mediums, and I feel like musicians have a soft spot for film, and they have a different relationship with film than most other people. So before we go, I ask everybody before they go, what is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is... It's a British low-budget film directed by a guy called Bruce Robinson, and it was funded by George Harrison, and it's called Withnail and I, and it's about two out-of-work actors at the end of the 60s who tried to have a holiday and then come back again. That's it. Nothing happens. There's no plot. It's just what I love about it, and this is what I love about being in a band as well. It's very revealing about male relationships, basically.
Thanks to Jeremy for sitting down with me and talking all about everything's music. If you guys want to see more interviews just like this, you can go to facebook.com/Studio67NCC, youtube.com/NashComCollege, or you can find us on Instagram at Studio67NCC. Thank you all for watching. I'm Isaac Anderson, and until next time, stay lovely.